District Board of Trustees. Cynthia, can we get a roll call?
Jennifer Baker.
Here.
Amy Martinson.
Here.
Marianne Mancuso.
Here.
Kyle Iverson. Here. Michael Baldini.
Here.
Rosada Segura.
Here.
Rafael Rios.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll go to item number 3 on the agenda, the public comment on closed session items. This time, we'll devote a total of up to 15 minutes for comments to the Board of Trustees regarding the closed session agenda items. Is there anybody wishing to speak? Seeing no one and having no speaker cards, so close the public comment. And then we move down to number 4, closed session, and we will adjourn for closed session and be back in about an hour? An hour. So about 5:35.
Point of order. We need to announce verbally the closed session items. It's in the Brown Act.
So the closed session items, 4.1, conference with labor negotiators, 4.2, public employee evaluation, and 4.3, public employment. Thank you, Ms. Martinson. And now we will adjourn to closed session. We call the meeting back to order. We're returning from the closed session. We're on item 5.1. Before we get there, I do want to note that our student trustee, Manveer Sandhu, is with us now. And now, right, 5.1, we have nothing to report from closed session. So 5.2, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kyle. 5.3, adoption of the agenda. Any questions, comments, or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by consensus. Now, item number 6, public comment. At this time, we're going to devote a total of up to 15 minutes for comments to the Board of Trustees regarding any subject not appearing as an agenda item for this meeting, but over which the board has jurisdiction. The public may ask the board to place an item related to the business of the district on a future board agenda. No action or discussion will occur at this time on such items. Individuals will be limited to a 5-minute presentation. I do have one speaker card here from Brian Fonseca. Please.
My name is Brian Fonseca. I'm the women's basketball coach here. And first off, I want to thank you because I think it was a year ago at this meeting I was approved, so thank you. And if I can also plug, thank you for priority registration as a coach, because I think that's very important for our students, and it's going to be very helpful for athletes, especially sophomore athletes. So I thought I should mention that because it's that was used a lot by our competitors that we didn't have that. So thank you, as I'd like to mention that too. We had a media day a while back that Doug helped us put together. It was fantastic. Dr. Kraft was there and Mr. Iverson, so it kind of came up with the girls. We are in kind of a plan to get new uniforms. So sheepishly, that's not why I'm here. I'm really here to say thank you and to be an advocate for our girls. I will mention, though, that if anybody would like to help, I think to tie in with our 75th year, my idea is to have 75 storm chasers at $75. That would probably be just about enough to take care of that. So if anybody is interested, I think you know where you can find me. But thank you. And we do have 10 girls at this time. They're very excited. It's kind of a process in building. But I just wanted to acknowledge them and the fact that they were kind of urging me, and I told them I would go so to be an advocate for them also. So I think that is it at this time. And thanks for having us. And we're moving forward. Thank you. And coaches are superstitious, so new jerseys, new fortunes, all that good stuff. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on general public comment? See no one, I'll close the general public comment and move on to item number 7, constituent group reports. 7.1, academic senate report. Amanda Badgett, who is not present.
Yeah, I just would say that this is welcome to a typical July meeting, which can be a little sparse. So the constituent presidents and representatives, most of them, all of them, have seen me and begged your indulgence, and they're either away enjoying holiday or could not make it tonight. So there are a couple people here, but they wanted me to share that with you.
And we will name them off anyway to make sure
Okay.
that there's a record.
Okay.
7.2, Administrative Confidential Senate Report, Ken Arnold, also not present. 7.3, Associated Students of Napa Valley College, Raphael Monzo.
Present.
Wow, yay.
Yes, July meeting indeed. Greetings, everyone. Happy summer. We've got about 4.5 weeks left. Oh my! Don't remind the students or anyone at my office because we're like, no, but we're actually, we are very productive this summer. I have to say, like, my board is, as the new president, I feel that I was really clear with them at the very beginning of June what my goals were as the new leader and what my goals would be for the year as a whole. And then I feel that everyone who is on our new board has immense vision for their position, and it's coming forward, it's manifesting over the summer a lot. Everyone's in the office a lot more than any of my previous boards that I was a part of when I was a senator for 3 years ever did. Summer is a really slow time for ASNVC typically, but starting with this board, I feel like we're going to set a whole new precedent, a whole new standard. We've got all of our committees active. Some, all that are necessary. Our seasonal committees are not yet in need, but we've set up all of our standing committees. We've got people serving. We're patiently waiting to hear about how district committees are going to settle, because I hear that many of them are being merged, planning and such. So once that's ready for fall, then we'll appoint our representatives to serve on all of those committees, like LOAC and SSP and all that. So anyways, we were really productive over the summer. We've had more meetings than any ASNVC usually does. In my 3 years on ASNVC, usually we had our bare minimum in our constitution and bylaws. We have to have at least one meeting in the months of summer break. And we've had way more than that already. So we're off to a really, really strong start. We've got a lot of events planned for August alone, starting with, of course, the welcome back tables that happen on the first 2 days of school. And that's coordinated through the Office of Student Life as well. So that will go out to everyone, like classified and staff and faculty, possibly admin as well, about anyone who wants to serve on those welcome back tables, help greet the students. You can sign up for a shift in the morning or the afternoon, and then towards the evening if you like. And it's just, it's a really neat way to interface with the student body, and it makes a really strong first impression. We give them like free snacks, ranging in all different diets and nutritional ideas in mind, not just donuts and coffee. So, it's really going to make a strong impression, I think, on those first 2 days, again, under new leadership. So I'm really excited about that. And then we've also got our speaker series already in the works. Like, we're already planning August and beyond, what kinds of speakers we want to invite to the campus and what kind of topics we want to open up, what dialogues we want to open up with the community and the campus. And it is the 75th anniversary, and I am very excited to serve on that committee. And to even think about what activities we might bring forward to help celebrate that. So that's pretty much my report, would be that we're really, really active over summer. I just can't give you anything concrete other than the welcome back tables, because everything is in planning, but it is being planned. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Great, thank you. 7.4, Classified Association Report, Jan Short. not present. 7.5, classified Senate report. Michael Rayford.
My name's Michael Rayford. I just got elected as the Classified Senate President, so my goal is to work with the students and with the faculty to make it easier and more productive at the school and crack our ideas together maybe, and hopefully we can come together as a group. I'd like to see that Napa Valley College comes back as like when I was a student here. It was more like a family to me. So I'd like to make that atmosphere again. Hopefully work with you guys too. So, and previously they've been working on the bylaws, so they're still working on that. So we're gonna hash into that probably starting next week. And we had a great turnout at the Father's Day classified Senate event that they had over here in the classified lounge. And we also had 3 classified employees attend the Classified Leadership Academy training in Lake Tahoe this summer. So we're going to try to do that again next year. And other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
7.6, Faculty Association report. Trustee Iwamoto, so not present. Item number 8, Superintendent President report.
Hey, note the time, 6 o'clock. That's, amazing, amazing. We've got a couple things on this. Let's start with Napa Valley College Foundation. I see our new prez here, Bill Hardy.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm happy to be back, and I've been nominated, dragooned, or whatever the proper term is, to be for my second term as president of the foundation. It's a real privilege because right now we've got a lot of things going on. The sort of nature of the foundation has changed quite dramatically. On Monday, we have our new executive director, Ann Branch, whom I mentioned in the last meeting, and we are going to be basically operating as an almost entirely separate organization after a couple of months, and including financial doings, et cetera. And to that end, Dr. Kraft and I are working on crafting a new MOU, which is easily Ron and my favorite task.
It is.
But anyway, it's going well, and I'm grateful to him for his help and input in it. On the 19th, which is our meeting next Wednesday, we're having a meet and greet for the new executive director, and we've invited you all to come, and some other cabinet people in the college. And I understand it's summer and a light turnout is expected, but we're hoping to have a chance for you to meet Ann Branch, and for you to meet maybe some of our other board members who you haven't seen. We are working diligently on the VWT program. We're waiting for the executive director to arrive to set up a strategic fundraising planning system, and that's coming up next. We have a lot of names of people that we're going to contact, but we want to do it in a kind of strategic and planned out way, and so that it doesn't come across as haphazard, and so that it's done appropriately. We are going to be reaching out, and I've already spoken with Ben Casada. We're going to be reaching out to the Student Association on an ongoing basis, because one of the things that we think we should be doing as a foundation is having contact with the students on a regular basis, and especially where I'm sure you've all read the story and heard Ben talk about the food insecurity issues that some of the students are having, and we're going to work on that. We're going to contribute to that, and we're going to do that on an ongoing basis. That's not going to be something, that's not going to be a one-off. We have, as you recall, last year we contributed a substantial amount to redoing or sprucing up the student center, and that's the kind of partnership arrangement that we would like to have more of with the students, because after all, that's why we're all here. We are hoping at the next meeting to elect under the Internal Revenue Code to become an organization which has an added ability to do public advocacy in the event that the school has a reason for doing that. And it's a relatively simple election, but we're going to probably make that because we want to be strong advocates for the school in whatever it decides to do. So I think that about covers it. I'm grateful that we are going to be in this situation. You know, if you think it's a tremendous evolution in the way the foundation has been run in the last, just in the time I've been on the board, which is about 7 years. It used to be entirely a college operation. We had an executive director and a secretary who were paid for by the college, and the whole thing was done out of here. And all the paperwork, all the checks and everything had to go through the finance, and it still does, and up until this day, except that that's gradually being weaned off so that after another month or so, there won't be any college employees involved in running the foundation or working on the foundation on any kind of regular basis other than just for coordination that we need for scholarships. And we think that's good. We think that we're just going to have to go out and raise a lot of money. So beware. If you see us coming, it's probably a good idea to walk in the other direction. But we're going to be raising more money, and we're going to be using it to run our operations and also to do a lot of the things that we've talked about. So thanks. If any of you has any question, yeah, Amy.
Where's the meet and greet for the director?
Wednesday at
where?
at 5 o'clock in the community room. Right.
And I just want to say thank you for, I like the direction that you're going, and I appreciate your wanting to be closer to the students and helping with the food insecurity and all of that. So I like the work that you're doing, so thank you.
Okay. Appreciate that. All right.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. I would say that, Bill, you're a little unsung here in that you've really provided 2 years of very good leadership, and now the third year as president, and then they let you off the hook for a year when Gerard did a great job, and then now back. And I agree with Trustee Martinson. I think this is there's a difference between a guided trail ride and actually riding horses. And I think now the foundation has really decided to take that second step, which is fabulous. I think it's going to allow the foundation to really spread its wings in the valley and make a stronger footprint, if you will, for the college and the foundation. So very excited about it. So. My report has a few things in it, and there was a cold article that we entered in here that was a report through the California State University system. It's about homelessness and food insecurity. LA found, remarkably and maybe not remarkably, that food insecurity and homelessness is on the rise in community college students, especially in Southern California. I think you have to be careful how you look and interpret that kind of research broadly, but it's clear that our own food bank here is on mark. It's doing good work. I also think that, generally speaking, student populations are really returning to the community college in droves because they understand our mission, and a lot of them are challenged, and working full-time or working half-time and making it. So there's an article there. There's a year-round Pell Grant, resumption of year-round Pell Grants, which is a good thing for our students, and you could take a look at that. Dr. Warnall is here tonight as well, and I wanted to thank her and the team for providing such great leadership on the accreditation cycle that we had. As announced at the end of last month, I'll just read a little bit of that. ACC, thank you. ACC, at its meeting held June 7th and 9th, reaffirmed our accreditation. What's important for the board is that, and you can keep scrolling down here if you want as I talk, but we addressed all the recommendations successfully and deficiencies successfully. It was a a very thorough, steady, and prudent application, I think, both of shared governance and action. Everyone in the entire college was involved from day one, way back, and has been working years on this. The follow-up report are posted here for you to take a look at if you'd like to. And the next, a little up, if you go up just a little bit, I'm sorry. I just want to look at the next step. I think our interim report is, Robin, maybe you can shout out, 19? Fall of 19. And it follows the standard. So we are on the 7-year cycle for accreditation. And just kudos to the entire faculty, staff, and administrators and students for, and the board as well, for doing just a fantastic job. If we move down a little bit, there is for those of you, and thank you, Trustee Mancuso, who was at the 4th of July parade, and other trustees were there or watched or, may have been. Just say yes. Yes, they were all there, front and center. It was fabulous.
That's okay. I got a car all to myself.
You did. You got a car. Oh, I think what's exciting. I was marshal when I got here in 12 of the parade, and it's grown. It's really kind of getting some feet under it. So, remarkably, there were thousands. I don't know how many, but thousands clearly of people who came out for this. So it's becoming a little of a hometown hit. Napa Valley College had an estimate. I don't know, Carolee, did you ever get a count on folks? But maybe, or Raphael was there with students on, 50, maybe. It was probably fair to say 30 to 50 Napa Valley College students, faculty, staff.
In attendance at the parade, or like walking,
No,
participating,
walking,
right? And then
hour,
on the truck was athletics, I think, the
Yes.
athletics teams.
Yeah.
There was at least 40.
Yes. So it was good. So there's excitement.
And,
Yes.
and we need more candy next year, right?
We do need more candy.
Definitely.
Yeah. We took the opportunity to kind of highlight and do a soft opening, if you will, on the 75th. So we wore 75th anniversary T-shirts. There was balloons on that, and so it was a nice thing. It's resonating very nicely in the Valley. People really like the ownership. There's a personal sense of ownership of our 75th by most residents in the Valley, and that's really heartening and not surprising, but really heartening. Festival Napa Valley is on campus today with their retreat and their board of directors. There are a lot of events that were happening. They're a 501c3. We're really happy that as a nonprofit, they're joining the college in expansion of the arts. And they are focused, as you know, up and down the Valley with many events over the next week or two. And exciting if you can go to them. There's a couple here at the college on our site on July 16, 17, and 22nd. And I believe there'll be seating for board members. So if you have interest at all in attending, or administrators, any administrators here? No, yeah. There's Robin and Carolee and Doug. So if you have interest in that, make sure to see me. And then there's some selected pieces there, and that's all that I have on the president's report. Let's go to public information and Doug Ernst.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft, Mr. Chairman, trustees. I don't want to be redundant, but that athletics meeting the other day was just great because Brian called the media. Yeah, and the register showed up, and the radio station showed up, and the athletics department showed up. The president showed up. Everybody showed support for. It's in the communications report about the third article in. Showing support for athletics is something I think the president, I think Ron Kraft started that, and people are responding to that challenge that we can be champions. We can actually be number one in athletics. It's a great idea, and I think it's working. The other thing I wanted to say was that the 75th is moving along nicely. I just want to give you a little bit of background on. The steering committee met. The register's on board. They're going to write about this. The Marketplace magazine is coming aboard. There's a banner on the pack. Flags on the street. The parade was a hit. And coming is a website improvement, plugging the 75th. Open house April 7th is being recommended. 7.5K run and walk and a benefit, maybe for the food bank. A legislative breakfast in the fall. So a lot of things are happening. Just wanted you to know we're on it.
Thank you, Doug. I think also it's a wonderful opportunity for board to engage. So a lot of opportunity. So in between those times when you're not working, there will be a lot of wonderful FaceTime with community, and I think it's easy. Sometimes it's difficult to just advocate, to go to an institution or a group or a meeting and just advocate generally, and it's easy. And you've asked in the past for materials that would help you, and we've provided some of those. The 75th gives you an extra layer of why you're there. We just want to make you aware that it's 75th, and we're doing outreach this year, and it's a starter. So feel free, right?
Well, I think the entire board is going to do the 7.5K run.
Oh, nice. Yeah, nice.
Doug, so sign them up.
Yeah, got it. That's great.
There'll be cookies at the end.
President's Cabinet, as I started tonight, they're away. However, Bob is here to carry the water for the entire cabinet. So,
feeling a little lonely tonight, but summer is a very active time for the administrative services area. Our facilities department and our information technology department are supporting summer activities, but then also feverishly getting ready for the fall semester and doing all those things that can only happen during the summer, like classroom upgrades and swapping out computers and things of that nature. In the business and finance office, we are busily trying to pay all of last year's bills and get ready for the auditors and open up new blanket purchase orders for the new year. So lots of activity in administrative services, and we're just keeping the lights on.
thank you. You want to speak on behalf of any extra? You're good. Okay, that's good. Well, thank you. That's all that I have for my report.
Thank you. We're now at 9, approval of minutes, 9.1, minutes of the May 11th regular meeting.
But we're going to have to insert it.
Can I move for approval of 9.1, 9.2, and 9.3?
We have a comment card for 9.2. Can we do, if there are no changes from anybody, 9.1 and 9.3?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I don't know if we're voting by computer today or...
I thought we were just doing them by consensus, the minutes, no? Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got a vote, so those are approved, and we'll move to 9.2, and we do have a Mr. Gary Ortman that wanted to speak on this item.
Very important item on, I think it is on item number 14.7 of the minutes. My name was spelled wrong. You got it right in item 7, but not in 14.7. And it is Orton, O-R-T-O-N.
I see that on your card. We'll make sure we'll get that.
And also, I'm accused of being, I'm part of a writers group, we're writing novels, and I'm accused of being the grammar Nazi. There's also, in 7, there are 2 words increase. That's an adjective that should be a verb increase. It happens to be related to the remarks I made, so I'm sorry for bringing this up now. I could have called staff, but I just read the minutes earlier. It's not to embarrass anybody, it's just to get the grammar correct. Thank you.
And I have to abstain from these. I was not present at that meeting, so if you want to take a vote on that.
So with those changes?
With the changes, yes.
Yeah.
Is there a...
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain? Thank you. Item number 10, information discussion items. 10.1, campus housing update. Mr. Orton, we have another speaker card from you for this item.
I really don't know what the presentation is going to be, so
That's fine. We can wait until we have some discussion.
and I may not have to. I had a long discussion with
Yeah.
President Kraft.
That's what I was gonna share.
This morning.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
depends what he
Good.
has
Thank
to
you,
say.
Gary.
But
Okay,
I think
good.
you know,
It's okay, thank you. We can call you back up if you...
maybe I have
continue
something,
to.
maybe I won't. Thanks.
Dr. Kraft.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let me preface it to say that I did have a nice, long conversation with Mr. Orton this morning, and we covered some good territory, and we talked really about some of the clarity issues that in and around scoping, focus, goals. I think many of those, as we shared, the board over a period of years, 3 or 4 years, has addressed almost all of those. However, the present makeup of the board, this board intact in toto, hasn't really addressed those at one meeting. So I thought I would take the opportunity. A couple of the trustees after the last meeting said, you know, why don't we talk about this as an informational item and either correct the record, dispel, clarify, and get the board kind of on record. So part of what I wanted to do tonight was to just address some of the scope of services, kind of what we're doing. If it's okay, and I think it is, Mr. Orton forwarded over I thought we talked about it this morning, a kind of a campus, Napa Valley College campus housing goals and priorities sheet, if you will. And I would preface this to say this is not unusual. I talk with a lot of folks in the community who provide many pieces of information for discussion and conversation. So I'm appreciative of it. It was good. We'll see how it goes, Gary, and then maybe I won't be appreciative in a while here. But generally speaking, I feel pretty good about it. So it was really my goal to kind of work our way through this, maybe for the benefit of the board and posterity. I don't, whoever might, the millions who may listen to our streaming. We're not streaming. We are streaming. We are streaming. That's good. But audio is better. Yeah. So a couple things. The board consensus needed to inform the public is something that we'll really work on tonight. So maybe I can just engage the board in some conversations so we're kind of shared. Knowing that there are a couple pieces here, that this is a 10-year endeavor, that there have been previous boards who have adopted this, have come at this development effort even beyond the 10 years. So I think Matt is out there, who's been here for a long time, who's been privy to Christensen, sorry, who's been really privy to many years of the board, talking about this. So one of the shared history pieces is that the north corner of this main campus, along with our other district properties, we find ourselves now with extraordinary opportunity and maybe some imperatives in development. We shared that 3 or 4 years ago with the board and also engaged forums across the district with faculty, staff, and students over the period of a couple years. We have had Q&A pieces. We've had presentations by many speakers on the not only affordable housing, but housing in general, the general nature of the economic environment in Napa. And I think in some terms also the city's involvement in the college and the college's emerging footprint, if you will, in Napa as a very significant player. So with all that as kind of background, which is several years of information, I thought we might focus on a couple things. So there are 6 questions, really, that are proposed tonight, and maybe I can just get us to help focus on these and talk about them generally. So the first one is the purpose of the development. And we're really talking about student housing as the first development or phase or project that the board has talked about. And my memory at least serves me, we talked about over the past several years recognizing that a couple board members, Rosada and Jennifer, you were not here for those, but all the other board members were here. We talked about the campus master plan. We talked about the potentialities. We kind of ended up talking about student housing because it made good sense in terms of the kind of the homelessness issue, the housing issue, the crunch that we were qualitatively get from our students, the reporting that we got, and our review of local newspapers and other folks. So it became apparent, at least to me, and I felt like the board was directing us to move towards a student project primarily as our first goal. So I'm just checking for the record. So and there will be subsequent pieces that are also on the board that don't go away necessarily, and that would be faculty and staff housing. There could be, in the future, other kinds of housing which we addressed, but I think that's down the line for other educators, or we talked about first responders, or who knows where that might be. It is not part of this initiative, but are we? What am I hearing? I'm going to just double check with the board. Are we okay on all of that?
Yeah.
Trustee Martinson?
I'm glad. I support focusing on student housing. I guess the concern is that the RFQ mentioned student, employee, and even alumni housing, which is like 25% of Napa. So I just have a concern, these kinds of inconsistencies that we're, nailing down student, which is what we said when we approved the RFQ, but then the actual RFQ was much broader than that. So I have a concern about that.
Let me say, and Bob, feel free to jump in or just leave me hanging here anytime. If you want, I think the major goal here, I think our shared understanding, the shared understanding is this is a student-oriented first phase. Now, because it's so easy at a university level to define student, it's just easier. They're matriculating in. They're normally that 4-year student or 3-year student or sometimes more, and it's easy to identify. Our student comes in many shapes, sizes, and ages. So the conversation as we move forward is going to have to be in your purview to help define what student means. It certainly has to be college affiliated. Does a student mean one class, one unit PE? And I don't think that we're heading that direction. I think, and we've had this conversation generally, that a student is probably a full-time student, and we even talked about what would happen after that group and another group. But I think my understanding from you and the direction I'm feeling from you is that this is a student-populated first phase, and we haven't decided on the units yet that somebody would take to be there, but that would certainly be a conversation in the future.
I agree that it's definitely that our focus initially is the student housing, and I think it's important that we connect this to the community, because what I'm hearing is student housing has a number of opportunities for us. It has the opportunity of bringing more students to the campus because of the ability to be closer, the transportation issues, bringing in people internationally, all these various student populations. But also what it does for the community is alleviates some of the housing strain within the community as well. And I think that that's an important piece to really be telling people or promoting, is that we believe that this can also, because students who do choose to live in the area to go to school here are also people who are going to be using up some of the housing that is already strained in the community, so alleviating some of that. And then also I think it's important as we talk to people in the community that that they do know, Ron, that this is an initial phase, and then there may be some opportunities down the road for other types of housing, as I'm hearing people say, but you've got so much land and we need housing and all of this, and they think that this is kind of the end of it. Mm-hmm. So I think making sure that in our conversations that people understand our direction, but I think that our initial direction is spot on.
Yeah.
I'd like to, since we're kind of setting like policy level direction, I think it sounds like there's consensus that we're focusing on students, but I do think it's important to narrow it down further and say full-time students. I actually, when I looked at the other community colleges, most of them had that criteria, that they be full-time students. I think a full-time student that's not able to work is, obviously very different than a student that's taking one class. And there's different need there. So I think that we should actually specify that we're talking about full-time students.
Let me just say that I'm trying to think of the presentation that we discussed. I think it was the earliest one where you got the big pile of stuff that kind of went to each of you. I think at least one of the best practices that Bob and I talked to when we talked to several other colleges and consultants was it tends to sort itself out. So at the end of the day, you're certainly, maybe it's like our registration system, priority A is for full-time students. If you fill completely with full-time students, then you do, and bless your heart, right? I mean, we all do well. And then it opens to 9 or above, and then 6 and above, or something. But that's part of the feasibility study as well, to determine, the need. But I think from what I'm best understanding is that tends to address itself, and the colleges and universities who have use this approach quite effectively.
But wouldn't that determine the scope? When you're looking at the scope, obviously it's very different if you're talking about full-time students versus anybody taking a class. How do you define the scope unless you define who you're serving?
Some of that comes, well, it's an interesting question. It is part of scoping. So, what we have to do is determine who we're building it for. And the more we do in feasibility studies, surveying, as we move forward. I was going to share with the board, let me find my notes here real fast. We have done some preliminary surveys, and we're about 800 respondents now in terms of surveys. We did some spring surveys, some summer, and we're getting ready to release in August another survey release that will go out to students. About 76%, somewhere in there, plus or minus, show great interest in the housing approach. And most of those students tend to be in the 18 to 22-year-old. But I think where we're talking about the same thing, tend to be taking more units directed towards either a certificate or an AA degree here, or transfer. In that group are also folks who may or may not be, I think we maybe all know examples of students who will vary in their enrollment pattern. So they'll take 12 off-season. Right now it's very difficult for workers in the industry up Valley to take a full load, so they don't. In spring semester is a lot easier for them. Crush is over, things calm down, they're able to go back to work, their counts go up for that group. So it's a little variable that we'll have to just kind of play with. But I think we're in agreement there. Yes.
This past weekend, I was given a presentation by TCAS, and that's the Institute for College Access and Success.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this idea for one reason, because the cost of higher education in the community college system is more than the state and UC system after college aid is given. And I could give I could share the presentation I was given, but I really like this idea because of that. It would offset the cost that low-income students have to pay for education.
I think it gets at that. Thank you. That's good. So in terms of the purpose and the scope, I think that's the goal. We also talked about, if there's priorities, why are you doing it? It's kind of the why question. And I think my understanding, and I'll again check, has been for several reasons. One is that exact reason, student success. So we do definitely have a housing crisis in Napa Valley. The city and county are exploring I'm not an expert on this, so I just have to kind of relay what I've heard. But granny units and flats and conversion of extra rooms, those things which used to be unavailable and really bird-dogged by the city and county are now being encouraged. And in fact, they're providing grants to convert bedrooms in your home to units. Yeah. So it's different. We are now officially in a crisis mode in the county. So expanding that inventory is good. The other piece is student success, creating an environment where students live, work, and study on campus. The third was, and we talked about this, if there is revenue that is generated or accrued above and beyond the costs, those dollars are useful and welcome for the community college to help offset other costs. We've also talked about how those funds may be used to subsidize students if it's enough, to help offset general fund, to help to which basically would be again for students, or to help students generally. There's 100 ways to do that, all in the venue and the policy decision and direction of this board before we get there.
Kyle, did you have a comment?
To me, this can't happen fast enough, and my understanding is that it's students first and student housing first as the beginning element, and I wish that we could focus on a broader approach and be looking at faculty and staff housing right now, but my understanding is that it is student housing, and I think that it's an opportunity for the college to provide some leadership to the community right now by addressing this issue. I don't think that we can make it just full-time students, because I think a lot of part-time students would, take more classes if they had the ability to live on campus. I think we are a little limited in our RFQ, but I understand why. I think some of the requirements that we had in the RFQ made it a little too strict. Primarily the 4 student housing plans, I think had that been a little looser, we maybe would have gotten more interest in our RFQ. I'm curious to see how many we have right now, but this is a good thing, and my understanding is that student housing is where we start.
I have, that's always been my understanding. I know there's been discussion about other types of housing, but I've had a concern about that the entire time. And I still have a concern as we discuss this that people are saying phase 1, the first phase or the first step. And I think that just confuses the issue. I think for some people it makes them think that we're already planning to go to other types of housing after this. So I would really try to want us to be a lot more clearer and more specific that this is about student housing. And there is no plan to move on. I know there's a lot of interest in the community for other types of housing. We've already had groups approach us about that. But I think we're a community college. This is about the students. This is the first of these types of projects, other than strictly classrooms that we're getting into. And I see this as, right now, that's all it is. Once we go through this, if it works out, if feasibility, continues to drive us forward, and we're able to take this project, to the end and have that, I think once we've done that and gotten through this would be the time to come back and consider other things from what we learn as we move through this project. So I think we should just be careful about that. I think people get the idea that we've got 5 different types of housings already lined up, which is, in my view, not true and not what we're doing.
Well, how would
Jennifer?
you,
I was just going to say I agree 100%. You took the words right out of my mouth. That is particularly with the use of the word phasing. I think that we have to be very cautious about that and be very clear that this is what we're planning. And if everything goes beautifully then yeah, we can consider those things down the road, but it's not part of a current plan.
I think my point was just not to, if people are talking to us and they're requesting, can this happen down the road or whatever, to just not make it sound like it's a dead end. This is what we're doing now. Yes, and we all need to have consensus on this is what we're doing now and speak with that one voice. but as people are bringing this to us, that we leave it, to where there's an open door that we're listening. I mean, I don't, how would you, I guess I'm asking you, how would you handle those comments?
I would say that that's something that we would come back after this project is done to consider. It's not something under consideration right now.
Okay.
Can I ask are you okay on this? Yeah. I need to ask a clarifying and get kind of the sense of the board as well. So during this process in the previous 3 years prior to right now, I made a presentation to Classified Senate, and I also made a presentation to the Faculty Senate asking for their general interest in terms of faculty staff housing, and they're generally interested. We haven't gone any farther, but I want to make sure or not whether or not we should include questions of feasibility, of the nature of feasibility in this cycle, or whether or not that's not the board's decision, and you would rather I waited until we were completely finished with this before addressing even the possibility of faculty and staff. So that clarity would help me.
Well, I think that faculty housing is something that would more naturally follow the student housing. We've had, the groups we've had inquiries from have been from the outside, low-income housing and workforce housing, outside of the college. Mm-hmm. So to me, the faculty housing more naturally follows. And while we're not planning for that right now, if some of this information we're gathering may help in the future if we get to that point, that seems okay to me.
It's okay. I want you to be clear though. So once you ask somebody, a question, right? Would you be interested in faculty and staff housing? Then they may come back and say, hey, what about us? And maybe that's exactly your point, which is good. The demand would be there.
Right, and we say,
Sorry,
if the student, I apologize if I jumped in on you there, but, if the student housing goes well and it looks like it's something we can handle, then naturally I think the faculty would be next, because that also, having a good faculty that is, and staff that, are assured of their workplace where they live and making it easy for them, that's great for the students. My bigger concern is opening this up or appearing that that's where we're moving to, that outside of the district, other types of housing.
Got it.
So actually, I need clarification now, because I thought we had it settled. We were just talking about students, but now you're talking about maybe doing feasibility for college employees. So
no, I guess my question was, it has been, and up until this evening, a topic of repeated interest. So we've been talking about student and faculty and staff. It appears in almost everything. So I think the focus of this first project that we had talked about, and I brought to you, which is, hey, I think it's going to be simpler and smoother, as you've repeated tonight, in terms of student orientation. But faculty and staff are kind of waiting in the wings, if you will, to see, how it's going, which is, I think, in agreement. So the question really is, if in this feasibility study that would be conducted, by a program manager as we move forward, it's natural that we would ask them or not. That was the point, whether or not we would engage them to ask the question of faculty and staff whether they were interested. Not to confuse the issue.
I think it confuses the issue. If we're focusing on students, I think the feasibility should be around student housing. Like you said, if you bring up are employees interested, then I think it confuses the matter.
I think the gathering, we're so early on here that gathering information is just that. It's gathering information. And that's going to help us. I don't know how I could make a clear decision if the information gathering is too narrow. So I wouldn't have a problem with finding out, with bringing more information into the feasibility study, because that's not saying that's what we're going to do. That's saying, how do we know what we're going to do?
I believe I'm hearing two things, and let me just double check. So I could bifurcate with when we go out for this feasibility piece to make sure that we don't ask those same questions in the same survey. So a student survey is a student survey. And if we decide to ask our 100 faculty, full-time faculty, it's a separate something. But I am hearing, let's address, this is what I think I'm hearing, let's address the student piece first,
Right.
and then move forward, depending on all present speed, move forward as a second piece to see if there's interest out there for our other constituents.
I'm all for not complicating it. I'd like to see if it's feasible to take it on affordable student housing, faculty, and staff all at once. I think it complicates it when we try to separate student and faculty. But again, be up to the discussion and what we did as a board collectively. But I think if it's doable, I'd like to see it be done. I mean,
Does that
thinking-
raise an expectation that we're doing student, faculty, and staff housing?
That's what he wants.
Well, are you talking about just in terms of the feasibility study or the actual development, or?
if it's feasible to do, call it a blend, if it's feasible to have affordable student housing and faculty at the same time, I would like to see that. If it's possible.
The only way to find out is to
I
ask.
think,
If we build it, they come. Not be the best, but I think affordable housing in Napa is an issue that, yes, it affects students, and I 100% agree students first, but we also have faculty that can't afford to live in Napa, and we have staff. So
Rosaura?
Just following up on what Kyle said, I mean, the housing crunch, and look at what's happening to the Napa Valley Unified School District and American Canyon. They're moving away because they can't afford to live here. I mean, what are we, the college students, I think that they're not going to have to deal with the traffic, or, they can't afford to live here. But it may, the faculty may, go through that as well, depending on where they live. They have to commute. And, I'm not advocating students as first and foremost.
But if we can't attract faculty, how does that help the students?
It follows, yeah, it follows. It follows. So they're kind of.
yeah, I'm not against faculty housing. I think I like the idea, though, of let's start with student housing and accomplish that. That's already a major task, and if that goes well, then I feel like we could shift our attention to employee housing. That's just my feeling. But one other thing I want to talk about as far as the purpose of the development in terms of students, one thing that hasn't been clarified is the focus affordability, or is the focus raising revenue? Because, the number that Dr. Kraft threw out during the PowerPoint presentation, and I know that was a draft, but in terms of a sample rent was $800 to $1,200 per month. And while that might be affordable for Napa, that's not affordable for most full-time students. And when I looked at some of the other colleges, I found that they're offering rents that are much lower. Taft's is $200 a month, Lassen's $300 a month, Shasta's $425 a month, Feather River $510 a month. So most of them are much lower than that. So I'd like to see us set policy level direction that affordability is the priority, not raising revenue, because that makes a big difference when you talk about what the project is going to look like, in terms of, what is the style of the project? Are they shared rooms? Are they single rooms? Are there swimming pools? Is there a gym? So what is the focus, affordability or raising revenue? I think we need to establish that at tonight's meeting.
Quick question.
Yes.
At other institutions, do they have faculty housing?
One.
Mm-hmm.
There's one.
There's one.
Yeah, if you say institutions.
Educational institutions.
Yeah, I mean, hundreds.
Yeah.
Or even
Community
thousands
college,
across
there's
the
one.
United States.
Just a second parter. If we make it to where it's only full-time students, I would be worried if it would make low-income students not eligible for this, since they can't afford to be full-time in the first place. Not to put it at 3 units, but maybe 9. I'm not exactly sure on the number but if it's full-time, it might make it so that a low-income student can't qualify for it in the first place, which is just the point I want to make.
It's a good point. Michael, I'm sorry.
Michael.
Yes, thank you. A couple of comments. Thank you, Manveer. I appreciate your comments and all of my fellow trustees. And when I heard you reference a movie, I looked at in our presentation earlier in the public comment about our basketball team. So I looked up team sports, and that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those classes are held. It's not Monday and Wednesday when I could hold a job Tuesday and Thursday, or vice versa. So then I'm looking at, okay, what else falls into that culinary, a fixed end date, or I'm moving on, and that's not only the student athlete, it's culinary, it's corrections, it's EMT, it's criminal justice, it's nursing, it's EWT that have a fixed end date, and the bed's made for the next cohort, or so on and so forth. So there is an end date, and there are students that I think that's important. I haven't run into any faculty that want to live right next to their students. So that I would certainly put that in the questionnaire among when we asked our students, that it include all of our career technical education folks as well as the faculty, and do they want to be how close to their students, or is office hours sufficient? Thank you.
I think
Can we go back to my point too?
Well, I was going to comment on that, and then I think we'll take a couple more comments. But I think that's a good point that you brought up, Amy, that I certainly think that we need to look at affordability, because I think that's the whole point of this. And so affordability is going to have to be defined. What is affordable for our students? In looking at who they are, where they're coming from, you know, that definition may not be what we're all thinking about. It may be exactly what Amy's pointing out, that, well, we've got a lot of students coming from Vallejo and from wherever, and their affordability is not what Napa's affordability is. So I think that's something that's going to have to be defined, but I certainly think that should be our goal, that it's affordable student housing. That doesn't mean that there might not be, if it's a good project, that there might not be some revenue thrown off that, as Dr. Kraft said, would go back to helping the students. But I definitely agree that that should be our focus.
Or lowering rents. Could go back to lowering rents as well.
Well, we have to cover costs and,
right.
You know, and things that you don't anticipate.
I guess what I'm saying is, I just want to get consensus on that, because it is really two different things, and it's important because, again, it will shape what the project looks like, you know. So I think that we need to get consensus on that.
I'm sorry, Michael.
To the affordability aspect, I believe the referenced community colleges are in where land is a lot cheaper, rents are a lot lower. Taft, I believe you mentioned Shasta, and so on. The land values there are completely different. So affordability, yes. However, we need also to be conscious of the areas that we're serving and the students we're serving. This isn't Taft, and yes, Napa Valley is one of the most expensive places to live, granted. But yes, let's look at that whole picture of market and affordability and our students.
Jennifer?
Well, I was going to say that we would need to work with whatever company is going to be doing this work to determine and define what is affordable for Napa, because that's going to impact whether or not it's feasible.
Right.
So we need to not only decide is affordability our main goal, but we need to decide what is affordable. Or maybe we don't need to decide, but somebody needs to decide.
to Trustee Baldini's point, I guess reason why I brought up those other colleges is that if we're not looking at having the market decide, if we look at how the market decides, then yeah, $800 to $1,200 is affordable for Napa. But if those colleges can construct a facility for their students at those prices, I don't understand why we can't as well. And that's my point, is that if they can offer those prices to their students, we should be able to do the same.
Well, I think everything here is more expensive. Construction is more expensive, all of those things. So the feasibility should help us decide, well, this is what you can construct. You can't do it if you're going to charge $300 a month. And then we might say, well, we're not doing it unless we're willing to say, well, there will be $700 a month.
Chair, regarding faculty housing, is that including full-time, part-time, and adjunct, or just one of the above?
Well, we're not there, so we haven't really discussed those issues. That may something that would maybe be in the future after this, hopefully after this project is successful.
I could hear that question coming up in the future, though. That's a good one. I would say, and I think what I've heard from the board before, I'm hearing you loud and clear. I believe the consensus is about affordability, and we've talked about that more than any of the other pieces. Student success. There are some tangible, tangent issues, traffic mitigation, pedestrian usage, bicycling, those kinds of things. Living, learning environments. We've also provided some statistics and metrics on, students who live and work on campus do better. They engage higher. We also have at detail outlined for you on different occasions that we would not build student housing with deep amenities. Because remember, we talked about our use of our pool, our use of our parks, our use of our gym, and we have a really very unique nature here in that the student housing that you're anticipating or thinking about is literally a 2-minute walk from so many other amenities across the street. That would make it entirely possible to build really nice units at something that was not going to cost an arm and a leg. And again, Matt knows. I'm sorry, Matt. It's the trouble of being back there, right? But you can build, as you know. I mean, there are homes in the valley who spend $10,000 a square foot, versus the 60 that I might want to try. But somewhere between those numbers, there's something that's a great quality looking, and we've talked about. At least from our initial consultants, and just looking at best practices, that furnished units work better, they reduce costs, so all that has to kind of be built in to the equation. As chair, yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. So you just mentioned that we're not talking about deep amenities anymore, so I was wondering why in the RFQ experience having done mixed-use development was made as a criteria for those responding.
So what kind of development? I'm sorry.
So in the RFQ, one of the criterias for the potential project managers was experience having done mixed-use development projects. And I'm wondering why we put that in there as a criteria if we're just talking about student housing and not some of these other amenities, the cafe, the bookstore, the gym, and all of that.
Well, those things, a cafe may not be an amenity like we're talking about. I would anticipate that there might be something on this side of the street. I don't know what that might be, but that's why this is not my biz. So it's possible that there's we've talked about it, a duplication center that's a cubby or something. I have no idea what our students would enjoy. What I do know is the lessons, and we've shared this, that we learned from Sonoma State and other community colleges, that don't build a bunch of infrastructure that you don't need if you already have it. So,
I guess my concern is that because we put that in there, it might exclude somebody from responding that had just done student housing and hadn't done mixed use. We made that a requirement for the applicants, and I'm just wondering why we made that a requirement, and then it sounds like we're not doing that, so I'm just concerned that that excluded people who had just done student housing, which is really all we're talking about.
Well, I think part of it is we're trying to decide what we're doing. Now it's more clear that we're trying to focus on student housing and that it won't be, with a swimming pool and those sorts of things. I think when you start the RFQ, we weren't, this far along.
That's what I'm concerned about, that we should have done this before we put out the RFQ and we didn't, and that maybe now people have been excluded that would have been good applicants based on what we're now defining.
We'll see, the RFQ closed about 2 hours ago, and today, actually. And so we'll see. We'll have a good eye, too. I think one of the questions, I'm not sure where it is, but Gary, and I thank you, Gary, for the questions, but one that we talked about was the, kind of screening committee, which we again addressed. That's the cabinet, which are the vice presidents and the president, and the board subcommittee on land use, which are 3 of you. So meeting together to screen and look at those, and if in the wisdom of that group we feel like we've omitted or we need to go back out or extend or change, then we will. I would anticipate that we would have a good, robust group of people kind of aiming in. And one of the pieces that I think I heard loud and clear from you is that we did not want to enter into, part of the reason for the RFQ was to avoid, if you will, individual one-up house builders or small developers without adequate background in doing more complicated, student-oriented housing. Like, I don't know the answer to the question whether or not it has to pass Field Act. Maybe, I don't know. Field Act is the earthquake-proof thing. I don't know, Matt, whether or not it's a yes or no, but who knows, So you have to have some expertise in this stuff. Matt, you should just sit up here. I'm just calling you all night. Sorry, man.
So who's
okay.
going to be on the committee to decide?
Different than the people I just mentioned?
Yeah. What are there other college stakeholders, classified, faculty, students going to be on that?
No, and no at this point. So in terms of the selection committee,
Yeah.
it is the board and the cabinet, and we will narrow down in that group, those 8 people. We'll narrow down the RFQs and then bring to conclusion, I hope, the 1 or 2. We'll see how it goes.
Can we include more stakeholders in that decision? Actually, maybe that's I think
certainly
I
we
would like
could.
for there to be more stakeholders in making that decision.
My recommendation as a CEO is if you broaden it too big, you're going to get lots of different varying voices. And maybe that's what you want, right? It's varying voices. Certainly I think cabinet and the board can adequately represent what we're looking for here. If there's a question on this or it feels less than clear, I think we'll definitely come back. There's no 3 of the board members here are going to address that as well.
Can I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
You're referring to the 3 board members that are on the real property or whatever, I forget what it's called. Mm-hmm. Once you add staff into that equation, doesn't that make it a Brown Act thing?
A what?
If you're saying that cabinet is also going to participate with this committee, does that make it something that's subject to Brown Act? Because my understanding was that an ad hoc committee could not have a staff person sitting in on it. Am I incorrect about that?
I think you are, but this is not this ad hoc committee. I wasn't thinking about this being a meeting of an ad hoc committee. I mean, this is the ad hoc committee is actually joining cabinet in its deliberation, if you will. So it's not, and it already is an ad hoc committee. So it's just part of this single purpose for this committee is to explore this issue out here. So I don't think that there are issues.
So I think we've given you a lot to go over, and I think we have to remember that we aren't going to be able to figure all this out. We're going to have to rely on, the experts that we have advising us to answer a lot of these questions for us to then set more of the specific policy and make some of those decisions. So, but I certainly think we did quite a good job of piling things on here for you to look at. Mr. Ortman, did you want to speak?
If I could take 2 minutes, I'll be very brief. And I want to thank you very much for the conversation you had. I think it was helpful for the public to recognize that you're still coming together to reach a consensus. And I think that I heard loud and clear, affordable student housing is the primary focus. It doesn't mean that you can't think about other things, but it's important, I think, that we know that. I think there's a couple of other issues that you need to consider, have staff consider. I think there's a problem, and I'm going to put my former attorney's hat on and counsel to other boards and whatever. I think it's difficult when you start to get a board member helping make staff-like decisions. Some of these decisions require confidential information to be given in the form of documents. It raises all sorts of public record acts because you cannot discriminate. If you give a confidential record to one board member, every other board member is entitled to that record. And you start to have some problems, some logistics problems. So one of the things I encouraged you to do is consult with legal counsel early on regarding this process and also regarding competitive policies and procedures. And I haven't seen those policies or procedures adopted at the administrative level even regarding keeping this competitive. My suggestion in my written communications to you was to have this selection committee, and that's the second stage, not the first stage where you kind of weed out the ones that you probably aren't going to be very competitive, and you get a group of 3 or 4 that you then have the interviews with. It's really important that you get counsel involved in making sure that process is correct so that you get competition, because the public contract code says you don't even have to go out to bid in this stuff, so therefore scrutiny is really required and having procedures that do allow competition. And one of the ways you get competition, as Orange Coast College did, is you make that second selection committee fairly broad in the staff community, staff and faculty and administrators. Okay, you can have it a little bit larger, maybe 6 or so that they used. And yeah, it's good that you have different opinions because that's what gives the competition. It might be more difficult, but once you give up, once you want to bypass the public bidding process, then you have to institute something that will bring some competition into it. So the other thing is, and it has to do with this question that keeps going back, and I kind of hear the conversation float around a little bit, and has to do with the net revenue. From my research and what Orange Coast College did, and what my reading of the law that allows you to do public-private partnerships without going into the bidding code is that any revenue that's generated from this activity has to be used for that activity, either directly or indirectly. So obviously the electricity and the maintenance of the building, but also if there's enhanced security that's needed, yeah, you could pay those indirect costs for that, but you can't go using it to give scholarships for other things. Maybe a scholarship for somebody as a resident of the unit, so you can reduce that person's rent, but it has to be related, in my reading, so that's why you need to check with legal counsel before you start making assumptions that you can generate $1 million a year for the college when you have to pump it back in to the residents. So those are going to affect your decisions. You don't have to make that. You don't have to know that tonight for the direction you're giving. But it's as a board member with your fiduciary responsibility and your oversight responsibility, you really need those questions asked. I've asked those questions in writing, and I assume they will get answered sometime. And thank you very much, because it was a wonderful discussion. I think President Kraft, you may have learned a few things that you thought everybody was on the same page, and it was a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee, kind of to his point about going back to this committee, I agree. I think it's a little inappropriate to have board members on that. We wouldn't do that in any other situation. All of that would be done by staff, and then it would come to us as a whole board. And I just have a little bit of a concern of 3 board members. I just think it's outside of the role of a board member. I think it's inappropriate. But
Well, we'll certainly look into those issues, but I don't think it's inappropriate for a board committee to be involved in this process. But We will look into those issues as well as the ones that Mr. Orton has raised as we go along. Thank you, and we're going to move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, let's see, where are we? 10.2, first reading of new, revised, or to be repealed board policies.
Is this you? I think this is going to be Managing Director Carolee Catalica.
Well, we've talked about this board policy a few times, and it is coming before you for a first read. We have taken the step that we're taking with the entire board policy manual to move the procedures out of the policy and into regulation. And so what you are looking at as a first read is the league template related to the establishment and operations of auxiliary organizations.
So this, just to clarify for the board, what's open on the screen right now is primarily the league, CCLC, the league template?
Correct.
Okay, which kind of follows through, even though, and I would comment, we talked about this, and I'm just,
Yeah.
trying to assist a little bit. Most of the league templates are very, very short, very narrow, kind of in terms of their language, but their scope is broad. So this one tends to be a little even deeper, just because of the auxiliary piece. And then what have you done with the ARs?
We're again using the league template, and I've attached them here for your information. It varies slightly from what was the previous board policies language, and we have undertaken a thorough review of all the bylaws, master agreements, facilities use agreements to make sure that we're meeting each of the requirements in here. So a revised master agreement came forward for the VWT Foundation last month or the month before, and the master agreement for DAS will be coming forward as well, or maybe that did as well. I'm sorry, that also came through. And those bodies are going to revise their bylaws. We have initiated with the business office some more formal procedures for the timing and methodology of compensation between the auxiliaries and the district.
So I saw it before, the whole markup thing. So basically, we're adopting the CCLTC templates for both the board policy and the administrative regulations, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And that template language was kind of smushed all together in a policy previously. It wasn't that we weren't using that language.
Okay. I move to approve.
It's just...
Yeah, so
okay. I support it.
Okay. And
that's good to know, too.
I support it.
Yeah.
And it probably...
Yeah.
It will come back to you for a second reading and adoption not until September, so that we can make sure that the Council of Presidents, which is our shared governance group, has ample opportunity to weigh in.
Yes. One of the things, I support the new policies. One of the things, though, it brought up for me is a lot of questions. And most importantly, on page 11 in the policy, it talks about compliance review by the superintendent/president. And it basically says that every 3 years, the president is supposed to look at everything, look at the bylaws, look at the written agreement, and make sure that everything is following board policy and the law and these policies. And I don't think that's happened. At least it hasn't happened since I've been on the board. I don't know if it's ever happened. So
it has happened. Yeah. It hasn't been formal. You didn't get an annual report delivered to you. So we are doing that now, and that should come either in August or September. And it'll have a full compliance review. It'll have the financials and a thorough description of what the auxiliary is doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
10.3 Board Policy Manual, Chapter 2, Administrative Regulations. Is that Carolee again? Or?
I think that it is. Thank you.
It is. I'm sorry, but there are no proposed regulations at this time.
So,
Well done.
so our committee did meet, and we'll talk more when we get to committee reports, but I think by next month's agenda, we'll have some proposed.
Okay.
There goes your committee report.
Not exactly. Yeah, you're not going to cut off my committee report. No way.
Okay. 11, consent calendar. Any items that need clarification or to be pulled off? Questions?
A couple of questions about, I think it's number 7. 11.7? Yes, 11.7.
Are you asking to pull that from the consent, or do you have a brief?
Well, I have questions about it, so it's up to you if you want to answer them and then do it as a lump or take it out or whatever.
Well, if you've got questions, I think we need to pull it.
I want to pull
So
11.5.
So we've got pulling 11.5.
And actually 11.3 as well.
11.3, 11.5, and 11.7.
You can move to approve all even numbers.
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, then let's go to 11.3, Human Resources Document. Trustee Martinson?
Let's see.
Can you open this up, Cynthia? Because we'll have to go to something specific, so. Between Bob and I, we will do our best. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're Charo tonight. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's Bob. It's all on Bob.
I mean, I can wait. If it's a problem. I just had a question.
Sorry, no.
11.3?
Yeah, just kind of a question / kind of concern about, so I noticed they're hiring 13 part-time hourly counselors for the fall, and I'm just wondering how these part-time hourly counselors are used, if they're used kind of like other part-time hourly people during only like peak act season or during certain specific times of the year or all year long. So I just had a question about that.
Do you have a better answer? But yeah, I can answer it as well, but take a shot first.
Unfortunately, I don't. The best answer would be from either Oscar or Charo, neither of whom are here tonight. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I can do a little better than that one,
Okay.
but not much. I did talk to Oscar about this, and their seasonal. It really is to bring in folks to deal with that crush, and to really address the ed planning piece, and so the focus here is to make sure that everybody has this smooth, entry into the college at the beginning. So that's what he shared with me.
Yeah, I just had a concern about like what that does to like the quality of the service the students get. I actually saw, I was looking on Solano's website and on their counseling page, and I thought it was really interesting. They have a big thing there. It says they have a case management model of counseling. This is a new thing in which students have been assigned one counselor for the duration of their time at Solano. Your assigned counselor will assist you with, and it lists all the things. So I just thought, like that consistency of service and having somebody that's really knowledgeable from beginning to end, obviously it's important. So I just wanted to put that out there. That maybe you could look at Solano and what they're doing and how that's going. It's a new thing for them. And then the other question was, I was just curious, Howard, there was kind of an extra thing on there, assume responsibility for director, student support services duties. Did he take on a new role, Howard?
No, this is a renewal of that. He's been in that role of SSSP in addition, so it's just a renewal this year. We do it annually.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, can we get a motion to approve?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 11.5. Approve agreement with Wells Fargo. Was that you, Amy?
Yeah. So I brought this up last year when we approved this insurance, and I had a concern about it because we all know about Wells Fargo, and not just its bad reputation, but its crimes. I mean, they've been convicted of crimes and had to pay fines. And a couple years ago, we adopted that document, How to Do Business with Napa Valley College, and it included the idea that we work with ethical partners, and they're not ethical. They're not a good business, and so that's one, just a concern that it's Wells Fargo. And then I was also, when I was looking at that document, it talked about how for any service that was between $5,000 and $85,000, that 3 written quotes were required. And I was wondering if we put out 3 written quotes for that service.
So Bob, if do you mind, Gary? He may, if he, okay.
Can I also have, before Bob answers? So first of all, I want to disclose that Wells Fargo Bank is my largest client, and Wells Fargo Insurance Services is a completely different entity from Wells Fargo Bank. So to lump them into people opening checking accounts is apples, oranges. They're really, really different entities. And Wells Fargo Insurance Services underwrites through other insurance companies. They don't even really have products that they are directly service. So anyway, so I just wanted to clarify that because I know a little bit about how they operate.
Sure.
Bob?
Oh, okay, so let me just say a couple of things. First of all, when we brought this to you last year, it was the result of reaching out to the 2 major providers of student insurance in California. It was a company called Student Insurance, who were our previous student insurance provider, as well as Wells Fargo. And it was something that we do periodically to make sure that we are receiving the best pricing for student insurance. And all of this happened before the information came out about Wells Fargo. And so Wells Fargo was the lowest price bidder last year, and so we selected Wells Fargo last year. What we're bringing to you tonight is a renewal of that contract, a request to renew that contract, and we're suggesting renewal of that contract for 2 reasons. First of all, it is difficult to change year after year after year from one provider to another. You're using different forms, you're using different contacts, and so we do typically stay with the same provider for a few years. The other thing is that the provider of our primary insurance coverage for the district, Keenan Associates, never provided student insurance in the past. They are, starting later this year, going to be providing student accident insurance, and so we will be reaching out to them when we look to renew at this time next year for a quote. And then the third reason that we're suggesting renewal of this contract is that Wells Fargo, when we were requesting these quotes, actually revealed that the Wells Fargo Insurance Division is being sold, and that contract, it's pending regulatory approval, but should close within the next 3 months. And so our provider will not be Wells Fargo for the bulk of the time of this contract, but will actually be a company called USI Insurance Services, which is a large provider, large insurance broker that works in this particular market.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I wouldn't want to see this be hung up because of the deadline, and I mean for our sports teams, basketball, soccer, golf, all the other ones, I'm not going to name them all, but maybe in the future having a process, I don't know if it would necessarily be an RFP, but some kind of, so we can look at it and make sure that we're.
And so for a contract of this size, we wouldn't typically do a formal RFP, but we would periodically reach out to providers of this service to request quotes from them. And we do intend to do that next year because, number one, the provider is going to be changing for us this year, moving from Wells Fargo to USI Insurance. And number two, our primary insurance provider will now be able to provide that service for us. So we'll be reaching out to those competitors to get bids and bring that back to you next year.
And I think just the last point on that is that we do have a policy about doing business with the district, and I'm sure, looking at that when you go through these procedures. So
Maybe
thank you.
maybe reaching out to some local, is there anybody at the local level that does this?
I'm going to put Matt on the spot because
There really aren't, based on the size and the scope and the specialty need. In fact, most of the brokers end up using the 2 or 3 underwriting companies. Now, there aren't very many people who get into
Mr. Orton, did you have comments?
That was really illuminating, though, that they had to change their name. They had to sell it because probably with all of the pressure from throughout the United States, because we all know it's a subsidiary of a control fraud. And it's been a control fraud for a long time. And, the federal government sued them back in 2012 and collected, several years later, $1.2 billion in a settlement because of the fraud. And the stuff I sent you, the governor of Ohio, no friend to the liberal cause, said Wells Fargo's culture was compromised by greed. This is John Kasich, when he announced that the state would stop doing business with the bank for a year. The company has lost the right to do the business in Ohio because of its actions have cost its public confidence. So I'm glad we finally realize, because it has to change its name and do something else, that it's a fraud too. So that's good. I mean, I understand. But my second point in my written communication to you was that really you do need to have a policy, not just for this, but for all service providers like this, brokers, to periodically, and it can change. It could be longer for the more complicated. And I was to actually go out and do an RFP or solicitation if it's on the smaller contracts. Bob's right. I worked with several people in Napa, starting in 2012, with the county treasurer and the board of supervisors. The bank that they used was Wells Fargo, had for 10 years. The treasurer acknowledged that's too long a period of time without going out for another solicitation to figure out if there's other providers out there that could do it better, but with better services. So I recommend that the district also do that. I mean, it's just a broker. The insurance comes from AIG or Anthem or something like that. So the insurance is there. You need a broker, right? I mean, how difficult should it be to find a broker? You need to go out and do that on a periodic basis. I agree. You're under a time crunch now. You probably can't do it. And I was really heartened to say that there'll be at least a different name on the door come 3 months from now. Do the right thing, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Move for approval.
Okay, do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What?
Huh?
Oh, we've got it popped up?
We did?
Oh, where?
There it is.
What? It's not there.
There it is.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
I did. Touch that. Oh my goodness. It's a yay for me.
It passed approved unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, item 11.7, Napa Broadcasting Contract Renewal.
I have several questions, some of which would be for Mr. Schechtman and some maybe just for staff. First is, I just wanted to confirm that the programming that's listed in the contract that is on the agenda is separate from the work that Napa Broadcasting does for documenting the Board of Trustee meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Also, there was a mention in the contract about some analytics for number of people who listen or log in, or is that something that has been tracked in the past, and is it available?
It has always been tracked, and it is available. And it's interesting to note that it's interesting given you're asking the question, and I will get copies of that to everybody. But in the 2.5, almost 3-year history of Napa Broadcasting, the show that has gotten the most listens, the most clicks, the most listened to, which is 1,611 actually, which is a remarkable number, is the interview that Trustee Baker did quite some time ago.
I'm famous. No. Notorious, perhaps. The other question I had is about the money part of it, which I find a little bit confusing. So $350 feels really low. Do we have any sense of how that compares with market rate? And then I'll just give it to you all in like a whole bunch of questions, and you can decide how to answer. And then also there was a mention in the contract also about NPR type support. Do you get that? And if you do, where is that reported? And does it come out of the $200 that you were doing as like a chargeback per program? And then a final part of that question is, when you have this final invoice at the end, where there's the amount that would have been charged and the amount that has been provided in service, and then there's the difference, which is frequently in your favor, is that something that you were able to take as a tax write-off?
The answer to, let me sort of work backwards on that. The answer to the last question is no, because we just do it as you see on the spreadsheet, and Carolee, if you want to chime in, feel free. It's just a rolling number. So it rolls over into the next year or the next year or the next year. So the answer to that question is no. In terms of, I'm not clear, the only question I'm not clear on is what you were talking about in terms of the NPR or whatever.
Let me see if I can find it really quickly. There was something in the language of the contract about sponsorship. It says audio advertising on Napa Broadcasting and its local programs will not contain traditional spot advertising. Rather, shows will have specific sponsors.
Right. A couple of things. Number one, we have not gotten to the point yet where we have been actively soliciting advertising. As with any online effort, you do it, you figure out a way to get it financed, or you just keep doing it until you have sufficient numbers to justify sponsorship. What that means is that ultimately when we do get sponsors, when we do go out and solicit sponsors, it will not be, and this is relevant in terms of the quality of the program and the listenability of the program, it will not be spots. In other words, there won't be an interview with Dr. Kraft that I say, well, just hold on 1 second while we listen to a commercial from Joe's Muffler Shop. That's not what it'll be. The kind of commercials that we would have, the kind of sponsorship we would have, would be NPR-like sponsorship where the program is sponsored, where I might say, or the host might say at a certain point, you know, underwritten by XYZ, or, you know, these debates, or our election programming is made possible through the contribution of Joe's Insurance Service or something like that. So that's what that's in reference to. And its relevance is to the quality and the sound of what we're trying to do. So that if we're doing, you know, the fireside chats, or if we're doing interviews, as we've done over 50 of, with various people here at the college, it's not going to be interrupted by jingles, by commercials, by mattresses, et cetera, et cetera. That is never the intent and not something we would ever do. So that's what that references.
So if I can just ask a follow-up on that.
Of course.
So say 6 months from now, suddenly some, you know, Sutter calls you and says, we want to sponsor the food and wines thing, and so they want to be would that be reflected in the contract with where would the money go?
The money would go, Napa Broadcasting is a for-profit company that doesn't have a bank account at Wells Fargo, I might add. But seriously, no, it's for-profit, it would go into the company. If in fact Sutter said, we want to sponsor all the stuff you're doing for the college, then the college would get a piece of that, as the way it's broken out. There would be a revenue share. But if in fact Sutter was sponsoring other things, and there's all the other programming with local electeds and local issues, et cetera, that's between Sutter and Napa Broadcasting. That has nothing to do with the college. The college would revenue share on any advertising, any sponsorship that is incorporated into programming from the college. Because if, Eric is on doing an interview, or, the chancellor even, whoever it is, if it's related to the programming that we're doing for Napa Valley College, then Napa Valley College would share in that revenue.
I have several questions as well, I think mostly for Dr. Kraft. Since we just looked at the board policy on auxiliary organizations, it mentioned that each time you create a new agreement for a service, that in the written agreement it needs to state why it's being organized under the auxiliary instead of the district. And so I'm wondering about the choice to, in the past this contract was with the district and now it's been moved to the auxiliary DAS. And so I'm wondering about why that decision was made.
Amy, I know you, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt Dr. Kraft, but the original, there's only been one other contract, and it was with District Auxiliary Services. There's never been an agreement with any other entity other than DAS.
Okay, I thought it was with the district.
No.
But, so anyway, why the decision to have it be with DAS and not the district?
I'm going to rely
And actually, maybe I should, because it's kind of pairing the second question, because one of the things it talks about with these auxiliaries is that that any services have to be, quote, an integral part of the community college's educational programs. And so the second part is, how is this an integral part of the community college's educational programs?
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Let's do a couple pieces. To just reiterate, it has been a DAS contract. The district auxiliary services, if you can envision, but you go back to it maybe, the BP, the policy on that, one of the things that the chancellor's office has clearly delineated that auxiliary services are useful for is PR and communications. So it was a natural fit for this, and our portion of this contract is really about visibility, college PR. So that was the rationale.
Yeah, let me just address that in sort of a funny kind of way, because I think it's relevant, and, at this point of renewal, hopefully it's a good thing to mention. More and more, we Napa Broadcasting and all the audio stuff that we're doing, both for the college and outside of, is quickly becoming the only game in town. In 2003, when I became general manager of KVON, KVYN, shortly after that, the stations were sold. The price that was paid at that point, the guy that bought them, paid $3 million for the station. Over the course of the past 15 years, roughly 14 years that he's owned them, he put maybe $1 million into the business. So he had $4 million into those radio stations. He's been desperate to sell them for a while. He just sold them. A young couple that came from LA, they wanted to be in the radio business, it was their fantasy, yada, yada, yada. Bottom line is that he sold the stations for $425,000. 10 cents on the dollar. That's what the market would bear. That was a good price given the reality of the market. The two largest radio companies in the business, Cumulus and iHeart, are both on the verge. One is practically in bankruptcy, one is on the verge of bankruptcy. So that the traditional terrestrial radio business is a business that is in serious trouble. So what it does is it provides opportunities, and we're hardly the only one, but it provides opportunities for what FDR once called bold, persistent experimentation. The ability to do things that serve the local community, that give the local community a voice, to do it, in some cases it's within a more constrained context. In some cases it's in a more adventurous, alternative construct. We're doing it in the construct that I think is appropriate here. But this is the only game in town. I mean, these new owners that bought the station, they want to do some stuff on the music side. They may do some Spanish language stuff on the AM side, or maybe they'll do nothing or close it. And they have a problem in that the transmitters that sit at Kennedy Park, they have a year-to-year lease on, so that at any point the city can say bye, and that's it. Then they have the problem that they bought the stations for $425,000, and it didn't include the real estate that the stations sit on, so they've got a year to find a new facility, a new place to move it and the transmitters. So, we are the only game in town, and really in terms of getting this kind of stuff out. And, what we've done, and all this is following up on Dr. Kraft's comment about the communications and PR stuff. One, the degree to which we're the only game in town, and two, and this relates to both the college programming and it relates to all the other local stuff that we're doing. We've been, kept a high enough profile that an awful lot of people that had very rarely or not at all been on this college campus have been over here over the course of the past 2.5 years. We have had, I would say, 80%, and maybe it's higher than that, I'm being conservative, 80% of the elected officials in this county have been over here at one point. We've done a lot of stuff with wineries. Linda Reef, the head of the Napa Valley Vintners, has been over here. Catherine and Craig Hall have been over here. I mean, I can go on and on. A lot of people have had an opportunity to touch this place that might not have had an opportunity otherwise. So that's been a positive part of the PR side as well.
Mr. Chair.
Amy? I'm sorry.
Jeff, I appreciate what you do. I think it's nice that we still have a radio broadcasting here in Napa. I would consider myself an old soul. I like the fact that, we can still listen to your shows. It is a great opportunity for our local electeds to touch an audience, and I'd like to move for approval.
I still have some questions.
Second.
Yeah, I still have some questions. Yeah. It mentioned, so is this the same space? Are we still talking about the same space that you're currently in? Or is
Our same windowless bunker,
space?
yes.
Okay. So Trustee Baker brought up the $350 and asked how that number was derived at and if it's market rate.
I would say maybe it's above market rate.
Yeah. I don't know. Do we know, does any administrator know the square footage? Or do you know the square footage?
I don't know. Carol, do you know? No.
It was if you've been there.
Yeah. I think everybody's been there, but what everybody hasn't seen.
I'm sorry?
Matt is advising us it's less than 1,000.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, way for sure.
Yeah.
It way less than that. I would say it's less than 500. Matt, I'm pretty sure.
It's not.
Let me jump
because
in.
I've been in condos in the city that are 500-600 square feet, and
Yes.
I know it's smaller than that.
And that has to be reimbursed anyway to the district, correct? Because it says that staff time has to be reimbursed, rent has to be reimbursed, so that's all reimbursed to the district, correct?
That's correct.
So, okay.
I mean, that's the quid pro quo of the exchange of airtime for the rent.
Okay. So I'll get straight to what my concern is about the agreement. So I know you mentioned that we've had some electeds on and some good publicity, but we've also had some negative publicity because, in your own words, you're irreverent and you have offended people.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I'm concerned that, when we're so tied up, it looks like we're one and the same. And, regardless if there are, disclaimers that, his comments don't represent the college, I don't think those would hold up in court. And it's also, it's not, I think it's a liability to the college, and it's also could be an issue for our reputation. Kind of related to that, but something hasn't been brought up before is Jeff is heavily involved in elections, and not unlike, for example, the League of Women Voters when they hold forums on our campus, and they have the same questions for each candidate, and all the candidates are invited, and that's not the case. With Jeff, certain candidates are given interviews, others are not. They're asked very different questions.
I think that's the same for national elections, too.
Can I finish for a second?
Okay.
My concern is that we're a public institution and we're not allowed to participate in elections or favor one candidate over another. So I'm concerned again that is a legal issue. So overall, I have no problem with Mr. Scheckman using that space. What I would prefer to see is for us to be completely independent, that he just lease the space at market rate. And then interview our officials as he would interview anybody from the community, because that's what he does, but not to be so paired with him, because in the end we have no control over his content. I don't see anything in the contract that says, for example, that he has to abide by, the legal standards, some legal standard of journalism or anything like that. So
can I?
Yeah, I'm concerned. I'd like to see us separate and be independent.
Question. Trustee Martinson,
So may
is it personal? Is
No.
it a personal? I mean, I feel like
It's not personal.
Can I, Kyle, do you mind?
It's not personal.
So first of all, the contract just does have an indemnification clause in it, so it doesn't, it's a hold harmless. So that kind of, eliminates us from liability for anything he might say. But we don't know that the printer that we use to print something, right, isn't endorsing something that we wouldn't endorse. So how are we holding him to a different standard than we would hold somebody else that we do business with?
May I make a suggestion?
May I?
Yeah, I'm confused.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to make a suggestion, but you go ahead.
Okay, let me make a couple of quick comments. Number one, I think we're all, and I know I speak for some of the members of the board, everybody's involved in politics, everybody's active, everybody's out there doing things for their particular candidates, their particular cause. You guys are far more representative of the college than I am or anything I would do. I've seen a number of you at various political events, so that you have profiles, you have reputations, you are elected members of this college board, and you're politically active. That's number one. Number two, I have to respond. I probably shouldn't waste the time, but I'm going to anyway, and I hope you'll indulge me. In a comment that Trustee Martinson made, which was way off the reservation with respect to, quote unquote, the legality of journalism. I think that completely misses the point
Ethics. I said ethics.
of journalism in general and of what's happening in journalism today. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to read you something, a brief little piece here that just appeared a couple of weeks ago in Politico, written by Michael Stevens, who's the vice chair of the journalism school at NYU. He works with Jay Rosen, who is the head of the journalism school at NYU and one of the most distinguished journalism folks in the country. And let me just take a second to read this to you. It says, the big news in American journalism today has been that reporters, editors, and producers at legacy journalism organizations have become eager to dispute more questionable pronouncements. The big news is that many of our best journalists seem in news coverage not just opinion pieces, but to be moving away from balance and nonpartisanship. An abandon of the pretense of objectivity is in many ways a return to America's journalism roots, which is long overdue. Journalism in the United States, he said, was born partisan and remains so for much of its history. Loud, boisterous, and combative. Let's not romanticize this era of mostly disinterested journalism. Our most respected mainstream journalism organizations are beginning to recognize the failings of nonpartisanship, its tepidness, its blind spots, its omissions, its evasions. It was news when the patriarch of American journalism, the New York Times, finally used the word lie in a headline. American journalism has been changing in front of our eyes. Better that journalists surrender the old pretense to objectivity entirely. Most other countries are comfortable with journalists who wield a well-honed perspective. They all manage with their biases to be fine news organs. The democracies they monitor continue to function.
Thank you.
I move to amend the motion to not approve the contract and to have him lease the space at market rate and to be separate.
Just a comment that a lot of what you've said, Amy, starts to take on a feeling, a flavor that you're concerned about the content of Mr. Schechtman's show. That would be illegal for us to decide on this contract based upon the content of his programs. That's unconstitutional. We cannot do that.
That's not true.
With that, yes, it is true.
No, it's not.
Yes, we cannot we cannot base our decision on the content of his
We
programming.
can decide who we have on our campus and who we do business with. And the fact
So,
that
with that,
wait, I want to say something to his comment. I agree with what you said for a private, but this is on a public school campus, and we have to be impartial and we have to be nonpartisan. We're a public school.
We are
We're not
not
making the
the
comments.
vendor here. We are not.
thank you.
the
You've made
provider.
a request to amend the motion. Is there a second on her amendment?
Yes, to
No,
not
they-
approve and
there-
to have just
There
release
not being
it.
any second, I called the question on the first motion, and we've had a first and a second to approve the contract. All those in favor? Vote by,
May I make a suggestion completely aside from the vote?
we're done with this item.
All right, I will email it later.
Yes, and you identify who's the one.
The motion passed 8-1, opposed by Amy Martinson.
No, 7-1.
7-1. 7-1, sorry.
6-1. There's only 7.
Thank you.
6-1.
Advisory vote.
Down to item 12, action items. 12.1, ratify financial documents. Any questions for Mr. Parker? Being
Move
none,
approval.
Second.
all in favor?
I,
It's coming, it's coming.
oh,
Are we? Yeah. That's all right. Mr. Baldini?
And I seconded.
Sorry, still learning how to do this.
Call a 3-minute recess and.
Motion passed. Mary Ann, not present.
That's true.
Yes. Yes, 7 with 1 not present. Still not taking her.
12.2, contract with Godby Research for the 2018 General Obligation Bond Feasibility Survey. Yes.
Quick question. Was this for student housing for the bond or?
No, this is specifically for the general obligation bond, facilities bond, and that the board has been talking about.
I had one question just about the funding for it. Is this coming out of the 17-18 budget, or is this money from the last year?
17-18
Okay.
budget.
Questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Kyle seconds.
Second, all in favor?
Godby Research for survey. Thumbs up.
Motion passed, 7-1, abstained by Amy Martinson.
Thank you. 12.3, agreement with the Napa Valley Support Services. Questions, comments? Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Passed unanimously.
12.4, Products, Services, and Industries Agreement.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Passed unanimously.
12.5, approve agreement with STEM Inc. to provide electrical storage service for peak demand savings. Questions or comments? Do you have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Passed unanimously.
Okay, 12.6, Vallejo City Unified School District Contract Amendment, number 001299.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? That was fast, Cynthia.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. Down to 13, Board Report, Standing Committee and Other Appointment Reports, 13.1. Viticulture and Winery Foundation Board of Directors, Iverson.
We did not meet.
Let's see, Audit and Finance. No, I'm not going to skip you, Mary Ann. Okay, Mary Ann, Legislative Affairs Committee.
Actually, Kyle's the chair of that.
All of that earlier today, and you're passing it off.
He'll let me speak, right?
I absolutely will. I am, and Trustee Martinson, feel free to chime in. I don't have an official report. I have some notes here. So we did meet. We met on the 11th earlier this week. We did vote 2-1 with Trustee Mancuso and Martinson in favor. Trustee Everson opposed, and that was to forward a draft resolution to perform Proposition 13. Hoping that you guys are all familiar with that. The vote followed the discussion of 2 documents that were attached. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at those. We also, as a committee, requested that the board review Senate Bill 769 by Senator Hill. That's regarding a baccalaureate degree pilot program designed to ensure students in California have greater access to higher education programs that increase their workforce skills and career opportunities. According to the Community College League of California, the bill would enable an additional 10 community college districts to participate in the program, ensuring that the program will have an adequate sample size when evaluating its effectiveness. The bill, and this may have changed, but was amended.
May I?
Jump in?
It's dead.
I was going there right now.
Oh, okay.
We also discussed reaching out to Assemblyman Curry and Senator Bill Dodd.
Wait a minute, Kyle. Can I just elaborate a little bit on that bill?
On 769, sure.
Yes. So this is really disappointing because 769 is the original SB 850, and SB 850 allowed for that pilot program of 15 colleges to offer baccalaureate programs. And so what I heard, and I had a long conversation with Bill Dodd about this because he's in the committee, that, they just aren't wanting to do more for community colleges, and there are certain people in leadership who still have a very old school view of community colleges of today. And so, anyway, this bill, basically what they did was they extended the sunset, but it's done. They are not allowing any more colleges to opt into the program or to be chosen. And so the only way to get this rolling again is a new bill. So I would advocate that at some point, I know our legislative committee talked about this, that we figure out how we might be able to get behind that if the full board, chooses to do that.
We also formalized an agenda of meetings, which was nice. Our August date is tentative, pending whether Mrs. Curry can be there or Senator Dodd. And we also picked out some legislative bills that we want to track, research a little bit, and the next time we meet, we're going to be going over those, and we'll bring some of those to the board. It was a productive meeting, though. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Want to add one more thing?
Okay.
So I also learned that 577, which was going to allow credentialing at the community college level, is being held up, won't happen this year, and is also in trouble. So
I just want to add, yeah, since we did actually take action and get consensus amongst ourselves, well, not consensus, but we voted to support a resolution for Prop 13 reform. We were hoping that could be on the agenda for the next meeting so that we could bring that to the whole board.
Can I make a comment, Kyle?
Yes.
Just based on this, the SB 850 and the whole baccalaureate piece, it generally, the reverberations through the state, certainly San Diego Community College District has taken the lead. So Constance Carroll, Chancellor down there, will continue to push very hard for this to reemerge next year. And those colleges that tend to look like us in profile, that are a bit isolated or difficult to get to or from, you know, there's several of them that have 150-mile trip to the nearest UC or SCU campus. They're still pushing very hard. So it's still an idea that's not completely dead. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw it next year.
I'd like to see us take advantage in our VWT program, Vineyard and Wine Technology. I think that would be awesome. But that's my report.
Thank you. Audit and Finance, Mancuso.
we didn't meet. We did meet.
Thank you. For District Auxiliary Services Board of Directors, Segura.
We didn't meet. Our next meeting is September? August? August. So.
Is there a date for that? Or not yet? I think it's 30th.
I can look. August?
Okay, date to be confirmed. Okay, so next, ad hoc committee reports, real property asset management.
So there is a report that's attached.
There is a report that's attached, though we held no meeting.
Well.
Is that what the report says?
No.
No, it's a real property asset management committee purpose statement.
Which I hope everybody took the time to read.
Yes.
Can we give input into that?
Who would like to go on that one?
We'll turn it over to the board chair, also a member of the committee.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I wanted to add in, let's see, where is it? It says the committee will consider and recommend. I wanted to add in to the board next steps in the formal evaluation of assets. Because it's not clear who you're doing the recommending to, and it seems like it should only be to the board, since only the full board can actually take actions.
And I think that's in our policies. That is the purpose of all of our board committees.
Yeah, I just think it'd be good if we could have clarification on that. The other thing is the part about it being, it says the period of review and inquiry for the committee is expected to be of short duration. And that's the basis for keeping it a temporary committee versus a standing committee. Nothing in the description indicates that it would be of short duration. So either I feel like the committee either needs to really specify what its task is it just to look at housing? Even if it was just to look at housing, that's going to go on for years. So I feel like either it needs to be very specific to indicate that it would be of short duration, or it should be a standing committee. And I'm leaning towards a stand committee because we're always going to have land use issues. It's not a temporary issue.
I would agree with that. And I also felt like the December date was seemed kind of arbitrary. It didn't seem to really have any specific reason for December 2017.
Okay, well, I think there are some other factors that.
It's typically when we elect a new board chair, and then they establish the committees as appropriate or as they believe needed. So that's an annual.
All of our committees be.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. No.
Well, no, because some committees actually have standing regular dates that they meet on and are noticed. This one hasn't so far. So what I would suggest is that we go back and look at those other factors. But I think this is where we came out, right?
It was. I agree with you. I think the committee will consider and recommend. It's the only entity. It is a sub-body of this body, so it's structured to only recommend to you. I mean, so there's no other persons that it would recommend to.
My concern is that if you look at the Brown Act, there's actually no such term ad hoc. There's temporary committees and there's standing committees. And temporary committees are very specific and very defined so that you know that they're going to end at a specific point. And even in this description, it's not specific. They're going to be looking at land use issues. That's always going to be an issue. We even put this committee in our accreditation report to address our issues surrounding planning and budget. So it was important enough to put in our accreditation report. And I feel that these land use issues should be transparent. I think it creates distrust to not have them be transparent. And so I would like to see it be a standing committee subject to the Brown Act so that the public can participate, and us as a board, if we want to come and at least know what's going on. It's not some secret meetings between 3 board members talking about district assets. I move to make it a standing committee. Can I make it as a motion? I move to make it a standing committee.
It's a report.
This, I think.
It's on the agenda. This description is on the agenda, and so I move to make it a standing committee.
It's on the agenda. The committee reports on the agenda.
So we can't make motions?
The committees are committees that the chair appoints. So I'm not sure that you can change my committee.
Okay, well, I think it's a Brown Act issue because it says that things that aren't temporary, that are standing, need to be subject to the Brown Act, and this is not a temporary committee the way it's written. So either it should be more clearly defined and really be a temporary committee, or if it's going to be as it's written, it should be a standing committee subject to the Brown Act.
Well, that's where I think there are other factors, and I don't have it in front of me, and I don't know if you do. But there are other factors that determine whether it's a temporary ad hoc or standing committee. And I believe some of those factors are having regularly scheduled meetings. And this committee was meant to be flexible to respond to things that are happening that shouldn't wait for input for a month or 2 months. What I can tell you is that we'll certainly go back and look at that definition.
Yeah, you need to look at the Brown Act because that's where the definition is.
I think part of the initial charge of the committee is to make that evaluation as well. What is needed? What is their role? And until that's better defined, you really can't say.
Can I make a suggestion that come December, if the board determines that this is a committee that needs to continue, that we make it a standing committee at that point?
I think it's insulting that anyone on the board would think that trustees are meeting as an ad hoc committee secretly.
No, it's not about that. It's about what the Brown Act says. The Brown Act says that I've got it right here. It says an ad hoc committee has a defined purpose and a time frame to accomplish that purpose. Saying that your time frame is the end of the chairship makes no sense. That's not specific to a project. If that's what we're going to, we're already, it's July. So, if we get to December, and as part of the evaluation of whether or not we need to keep this, I think at that point, if it's determined that this is something that is going to be an ongoing thing, that we need to make it an ongoing standing committee.
I think based on what you just read, which is I've seen in the past as well, it either needs to be clearly defined right now with a timeline, or we just need to make it a standing committee. Having dates is not part of the definition of what makes a standing committee.
You just told us there was no ad hoc mentioned in the Brown Act, which she just read to us.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was called temporary, but anyway, the point.
Ad hoc or temporary.
Oh, okay.
Chair?
Yes.
I think there's a typo in this. In one of the final
There's
sentences,
one small one,
the
yes.
committee will consider and recommended. Next steps, I think that should read recommend. If that's
Okay,
true.
well, that's not a bad suggestion to look at it that way, but we'll certainly, that's what I'm willing to do, is go back and consider it, as Carol Lee said, that was one of the first charges, and maybe we need to lay that out a little better. So, is there anything
Yeah, I just
other
would
to our
add.
report?
I would just add, though, that I agree with what Carol Lee said. I've been viewing it as you're trying to figure out exactly where that committee is going to be useful and if it's going to be ongoing or if it's not. So, I mean, the committee hasn't looked at that much yet. There have been a couple of items that have come up, so it's kind of like our ad hoc committee. We're still trying to figure out where it's useful. So that's how I've been using it,
Not meeting in
looking
secret.
at it. Pardon me?
You're not meeting in secret.
What is, I don't understand the resistance to making a standing committee, but first of all, because I couldn't make a motion because it's not on the agenda, we shouldn't actually be even discussing this because it's not on the agenda. Actually, this probably should be put on the agenda if we're going to discuss it. Although we've discussed it for 15 minutes.
Discussion. Trustee 13.3, trustee and board chair reports.
Wait a minute.
Did I miss a committee? Is it yours? Oh, that explains it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So we did meet, and it was fun. We could have.
Yeah, oh, we didn't know about it.
We could have talked. Oh, wait. My microphone wasn't on. Sorry. We met, and we had a great conversation, Rosada and Jennifer and myself, and we identified a few areas that we're going to bring some information back and put on the agenda next month. Of those, I'll just tell you real quick, I'll sort of give you a little teaser. We talked about board reports, agenda items, and also cutoffs on information added to the agenda as well. So, and also debate and how that should be handled, or the request that we would make to the president and the chair of, you know, what we thought might be a good way of handling debate during our conversations. More to come. Aren't you intrigued?
Okay. Do you have any other committees? 13.3, trustee and board chair reports, and we'll start over here with our student trustee.
I do not have a student trustee report.
Thank you. Amy.
I was actually contacted by a former professor, Ron Reiner, who I haven't met before, but he mentioned to me that there was a film showing coming up at the college that he wanted me to encourage, not just the trustees, but he hoped that we would encourage the college constituencies, the students as well, to attend. And it does sound important. It's called Watermark. It's playing at the PAC, the big theater, on July 27th at 7 p.m. And it's about water. So it says, Watermark brings together diverse stories from around the globe about our relationship with water, how we are drawn to it, what we learn from it, how we use it, and the consequences of that use. So, you know, he made the point, and he's right, that we're all living in a watershed here in Napa County. The college in particular, we're on a creek, Tulikay Creek, and in a watershed. And I think it's important that, you know, that we all be aware of issues surrounding water. So I'd like to encourage everybody to go, and I'll be there.
Amy, can I ask you a question? Is there a foundation behind that, or, I mean, what's the group?
No, it looked like an individual or was behind it, but maybe part of a nonprofit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's from somebody from the community that's showing it here.
Great.
Yeah. So
Thank
July
you.
27th.
Thank you. Rosaura? Thank you. Ms. Mancuso?
I love a parade. The parade was great. I got to ride in a car and do by myself and do the parade wave. And Ron was in the car in front of me, and I got my T-shirt. It was great. It was fun. And then I had lunch, and maybe somebody can answer this question for me. I had lunch with Joan Bennett, as you know, is a former trustee as well as former city council member in American Canyon. She had a question about, here at the college, do we have any classes or anything that helps nonprofits succeed?
Oh, yes.
Would that fall under the small business?
Yes, exactly.
It would.
Yeah, there's quite a few things that would work there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then maybe you could send her some information or something, or somebody could. And then I just, on a personal note, I have something really quick, maybe quick. I told you all the story about the brother that I didn't know I had, and I could tell those who don't know about it later, but his daughter came, so I spent time with a niece that I knew that I didn't know I ever had. But the most touching thing about it is that they now know about their family, and so they've lived all their lives without, knowing who they were. They didn't even know they were Sicilian, but yet the rest of the family was blonde and stuff, and they're all dark, right? So now they know that. But it was just, I probably one of my, I don't know, just very emotional, made me very happy, a number of things. And I'm so glad that these folks are a part of our family now. They're wonderful people.
Mr. Baldini?
Good evening, thank you. I was delighted to attend the Police Academy graduation, and I just, with many of my fellow trustees, but I just wanted to point out that these two are ASNVC President, Raphael and Manveer. In my, however many graduations I've been going to, and there's been like 3 a year since 2003 or something like that, they're the first representatives, first student trustee and the first ASNVC president that I've ever seen at those events, and I appreciate it, and I welcome it, and thank you for being there for our students, whether in uniform or not. Thank you. I am also on the Board of Trustees, or actually chairman of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Citizens Advisory Committee, and we discussed bus routes and reroutes and speeding up the quote-unquote express bus service, particularly between here and Napa and the Vallejo Ferry Terminal and other routes. And just for the college's information, and in those studies, and the resulting was to take the buses off Deemer and put them so your stops are on 221 rather than winding through the college campus. So that's just something to think about going forward about access to public transportation. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Only thing I have is that I also was at the Police Academy graduation, and I just going on record that I know I still owe you money for brunch. So.
The one thing that I wanted to comment on was going and doing the little media day with the women's basketball team. I think it's awesome that we now have a team. I think it would be great to do something for all of our sports, whether it's a patch or something, commemorating the 75 years. Maybe we get to do jerseys for the women's basketball team, but have a patch that is uniform to show that solidarity across all of our athletics. I think that might be neat.
Good idea.
That's it.
Thank you. And I don't have a report. Nothing exciting. Haven't done anything. Well, I've done a lot, but nothing of great value here right now. So with that, sure.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're 14, continuance of closed session. Not necessary. Future meetings, August 10th.
Mm-hmm.
At, will we have our pre-board, that one? Or will we start at 4:30?
We do not have a pre-board schedule for August, so we're gonna wait and continue. So so it will begin at 4:30.
And that meeting will have to be presided over by Miss Mancuso. I will be driving my son to ASU, leaving very early that morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Nice and cool over there.
Yeah. What is it? August what?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. With that, we adjourn the meeting.
8:22, you win.